Welcome to this month's Speak to Council session. As a reminder, all speakers have 3 minutes for their comments. If speakers are participating via Zoom, we ask they address council with the same respect they would expect and to avoid the use of profanities. A staff member will notify speakers when they have 30 seconds left, and speakers will be removed from the Zoom call once their time has expired. Staff members will read the first 3 minutes of all written comments submitted. I would like to remind our participants and those watching online that my colleagues and I are here to listen. Listen to comments that are presented before us tonight, and as such, it is standard that we do not respond during the session. Participants' contact information has been shared with the council, and I encourage my colleagues to follow up with any comments or concerns that pique their interest. If you are participating on Zoom and watching via a live stream on YouTube while you're waiting to join this meeting, please remember to mute your live stream before entering the Zoom meeting, or you'll hear a confusing echo of yourself. We will now begin our Speak to Council session.
Brent Liberati. Bridget, I can't see you, I guess. So let's see. I'll read it. I'm not sure what's
I
going
can
on.
read it. Hello, Rochester City Council. I'm writing today about the state of the bus stops and traffic crossings in Rochester. Since January 16th snowstorm, 2 weeks ago, at the writing of this email, the bus stops and crosswalks have had large, sometimes 2 or 3 feet high, mounds of snow from the snowplows. This makes getting around the city difficult for pedestrians, particularly pedestrians with disabilities. While I appreciate that the roads are cleared, this is part of the long legacy of American cities prioritizing personal vehicle transportation over pedestrians and public transportation. It is time Rochester, and all cities for that matter, prioritize people over cars. Thank you for taking time to read my email. Best regards, Brent Liberati.
Eric Lynn, Zoom.
He should be in just a second.
Thank you.
He's in, Hazel. I think you'll have to call his name again.
Eric Lynn.
Hello? Hi.
Eric, you're all set?
Yep. I was just speaking because I had a question, if I'm allowed to. For like one of my questions about that I want to ask for the council is, what are like the potential protocols for COVID precautions? And I was just wondering because my school is still being affected by mask mandates, and I was wondering how the city council was going to, I guess, in such a way, enact different protocols to actually help the schools, and what are like the future precautions that we should take with COVID.
President Melendez, did you want to respond to him?
Eric, typically we don't respond to questions during Speak to Council, but we will have the office follow up with your question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Zoe Christanis, Zoom.
She's not in the waiting room.
Robert DiPaolo, Zoom.
So, excuse me, Hazel, there's been a mess up with the link. And some of them they're going in and out. So Zoe, they're going in and out of the waiting room. So Zoe's in, I'm gonna let her in and see if we can find Robert if he logs back in.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay, can we start?
yes.
Okay, great. Good evening. My name is Bob DePola. I, and along with the other presenters who will be speaking tonight, uh, uh, live in the Center City portion of downtown across from Planned Parenthood on University Avenue. We all believe in Rochester, its vibrancy, and its excitement. We have made a very conscious decision to reside here and be part of the fabric of downtown. We strongly believe in the freedom of speech granted by the First Amendment as the foundation of our democracy. We believe many of the tactics employed by the demonstrators at Planned Parenthood ignore many existing federal, state, local laws and ordinances. The right to exercise freedom of speech does not allow other lawless behaviors by the demonstrators. For example, Rochester's existing noise ordinance allows for religious exemptions for religious and political activities. What defines and who determines whether an activity qualifies as a religious or political exemption is unknown and undefined. Combine those nebulous determinations with a near total lack of enforcement of existing laws and codes results in a dangerous and chaotic situation to live in. In 2013, the RPD created and issued a publication titled Demonstrator's Guide to Federal, State, Local Laws and Ordinances. We want enforcement of these laws, none of which carry exemptions. This guide and other materials that we reference tonight can be found on the electronic information that you should all have received prior to this meeting. In closing, we are fed up with being assaulted by the almost daily barrage of noise, lawless demonstrations, and the lack of police enforcement. We implore you to make these changes, to make the changes to the noise ordinance and increase enforcement to halt illegal behaviors by the demonstrators. So control of our neighborhood is returned to its residents. Thank you for listening to us with an open mind. Thank you.
Zoe? You're on mute.
Hello.
Okay, Zoe,
There. Can
and
you hear me
then,
now?
and then Pam, after Zoe's done. Thank you. You're on
So
mute.
you're still on mute.
Hello,
Okay.
can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
Why?
Good
Unmute.
evening. I can start?
yes.
Good evening, I'm Zoe Christanis, former volunteer of Rochester Animal Services, RES, now member of Voiceless of Verona Street. We have tried to have our concerns with RES addressed to no avail. The building is in disrepair, outdated and unwelcoming, void of any TLC. There are broken kennels that have not been repaired for 2 years. They instead are being used for storage. Kennels save lives. This should be a top priority, but obviously is not. The Haas model RES is following provides much less service to both humans and animals. Citizens are told to leave strays found outside or to keep them themselves until owners are found. It is the shelter's responsibility to house and care for them, and they won't. Sending out ridiculous mailings and posts that strays are used to living outdoors and are happiest there, not at a shelter. The temperatures have been unbearable. What an insult to our intelligence. We are going backwards, Rochester. Animals are suffering, dying on our city streets, while kennels at RES sit empty. Taxpayer money not at work, not when citizens are expected to do the job they are paid to do. The dysfunction of management trickles down to staff. This boy, Hawk, came to RES this past August, very fearful. Love and care from the right people helped him progress, and he was pulled by a rescue. The day he was scheduled for neuter surgery, he ended up being euthanized. Things went wrong. We want this incident fully investigated. We want justice for Hawk, a shelter we can be proud of that welcomes our strays and citizens, that provides not only aid, but also education. Now, not 3 years from now. The current director has failed the community and our homeless animals. It's time for change. This shelter is yours too. Do right. Thank you.
Pam DiPaolo by Zoom. You're on mute.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm Pam DiPola and I live on Windsor Street. And I want to thank you for hearing us out this evening. I'm going to offer some background information. The demonstrations on University Avenue in front of Planned Parenthood aren't new. They've been going on since at least the 90s. And they've resulted in 2 federal injunctions, both of which have been provided to you on the electronic systems you're given. Please also bear in mind that that block of University Avenue since the 90s has transitioned from light commercial to primarily residential. In 2014-15, following depositions to the police department by neighbors who felt the noise ordinance wasn't being enforced, a non-legal agreement was reached. Amplified demonstrations would take place 1 day a week and on the 3rd Saturday of the month. This worked for 3 years, but since 2018, demonstrations with sound amplification occur 6 days a week, as well as on the 3rd Saturday. The city has posted no honking signs in our block, but these have not been enforced, and the honking encouraged by demonstrators contributes to the noise. In 2021, meetings were held with the Rochester Police Department, 3 demonstration leaders, Southwest Service Center reps, and neighbor reps in order to understand each other and to try to reach a compromise on the use of sound amplification. This failed. In 2021, we wrote Mayor Warren requesting that the noise ordinance be enforced. No response. Since 2018, there's been a change in tactics in that not only is amplified sound used 6 days a week, but it is so loud as to be heard within our homes with doors and windows shut. We can hear every word. Thank you.
Rosalind Goldman, Zoom.
Hello, my name is Rosalind Goldman, and I would like to speak to you, but I know that a lot of what I'm going to say is on your thumb drives. So please consult the thumb drives, especially the illustrations, because they're quite graphic. I live at 106 Selden Street, around the corner from Planned Parenthood. I run a small business with a home office. There is an entire street of brick houses between us and University Avenue, a street which we can't even see. However, even with our windows closed, we can clearly hear the honking encouraged by the protesters as they wave the cars at the passersby. We can hear the music, the singing, and the words from the amplified noise as the protesters block the sidewalks on University Avenue with their speakers and music equipment in the middle of the road. I cannot work in my office when they are present. And worse yet, I have been ill for about a year and a half. And at those times, I cannot rest or even try to work. This is a clear invasion of my home and my privacy. We are way more than 50 feet, which the noise ordinance describes as the place that the noise should not exceed. We have to be at least 150 feet. We're around the corner. The honking carries a $200 fine, which is not enforced. The protesters' noise is an invasion of my home, my health, my work, and my privacy, and it is not fair.
Sandy Wright by Zoom.
Hello, my name is Sandy Wright, and I live on University Avenue in the Grove Place. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak. I refer you in your handouts to the City of Rochester, Chapter 75, the noise ordinance. First of all, I'd like you to visualize that you are in your home. You're working in your office facing a street in the city. You are trying to work on important things for your job, or your grandchild is visiting and trying to take a nap, or a family member is ill and needs rest as stated by their doctors, or you are hosting a couple of friends on your patio way in the back of your house. However, there are several people outside of your house neighborhood yelling, using amplifying devices, encouraging people to honk their car horns. These are the protesters. They do this from early in the morning till 5 at night and sometimes in the evening. This happens 6 days a week. Would you think that this was okay? Or would you be unhappy and frustrated because the city you chose to live in is not following through on their promise in Chapter 75, which paraphrase says that they will prohibit all excessive noise from all sources in order to preserve, protect, and promote the public health, safety, and welfare, and the peace, quiet, comfort, and repose of the inhabitants of the city? Does the above chapter sound anything like the neighborhood myself and my neighbors have described to you? I say no, it does not. Chapter 75 also states that the provisions of this section do not apply to political or religious activities. And as stated earlier, this seems like a very broad category. We have tried and been unsuccessful in getting a definition of political or religious activities from any city department, nor will they tell us when permits are needed for these. Should exceptions overrule other laws on the books? With the city's own definitions, it seems to a reasonable person that the events going on in Grove Place neighborhood should not be allowed. We researched 8 other cities in New York State and found that all of these municipalities do not have exceptions to their noise ordinances. These are, and I have copies of all of these that I've researched: Binghamton, Buffalo,
30
Syracuse, Mount
seconds.
Vernon, Olean, Greece, Brighton, and Watertown. The focus of all these cities and towns are the health, peace, quiet, and well-being of its citizens. We ask that you seriously reflect on this issue and what type of city you want. Thank you.
Dr. Sanford Mayer, Zoom.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Sandy Mayer. I've been a 9-year resident of University Avenue. As I proceed here, I would refer you to photographs we have previously forwarded to you on the thumb drive. Also, many of these behaviors are prohibited in the RPD's own Demonstrator's Guide to Federal, State, and Local Laws, published in 2012 and updated in 2013. We are a residential neighborhood. The protesters stand in the roadway waving at cars, encouraging them to honk their horns on a daily basis, despite signs posted "no honking, $200 fine." Often these vehicles are city vehicles, such as fire trucks and buses. Protesters standing in the road, as well as in an illegally parked ultrasound truck, block the vision of drivers pulling out of their driveways, blocking view of oncoming traffic. This truck and protesters' cars will often occupy a metered space without paying the meter fee. I have noticed a protester spitting on my property. We have a photograph, and you have that too now, of a protester publicly urinating on Planned Parenthood's property. I and my neighbors have been asked why we moved to this neighborhood knowing there are murderers across the street. One protester holds up crosses to our face when we pull out of our driveways. A city tree, a beautiful tree across the road from us, has been decorated with flowers and crosses to memorialize a woman's numerous abortions. Protesters are constantly surveilling our comings and goings. They know our cars, they know our license numbers. They have defaced the roadway with paint, requiring the city to spend taxpayers' money on erasing it. The use of electronic voice enhancers can be heard through our closed windows and even in our back courtyards on a 6-day-a-week schedule. There are monthly demonstrations with loudspeakers in the roadway, objectionable sermonizing, loud music, and people often standing in our driveways. I asked an unusual loud protester to turn down the volume, and he asked, "Are you a Christian? My grandchild needs a white noise machine just to take a nap when she visits." The protesters harassed the neighbors. I found a kit containing earplugs left by a protester at my front door. I ask you all to imagine what it would be like for you to live in our neighborhood. We are a residential neighborhood. Thank you.
Suzanne, Mayor. Zoom.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Suzanne Mayer. I reside at 121 University Avenue. I have resided in the city for 12 years, 9 years at my present address. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and you've been all sent a great deal of information, including some amazing pictures that we hope you have reviewed. We have sent you emails as well. You heard from my neighbors, all of whom decided to stay or move to downtown Rochester. We pay taxes and we all give back to Rochester, which has given much to us. All of us love Rochester, and we all work to help it become so much better in a proactive, not regressive method. All of us and our families are ambassadors for Rochester wherever we go, and have encouraged people to move downtown. Amongst us, you will find a variety of professions. Each of us is active, whether working on not-for-profit committees, raising money for community needs, giving shots during COVID, and creating public art opportunities and supporting our downtown businesses. All of us support the right to demonstrate, having participated in many demonstrations in our lives. We don't support the constant cacophony of horns, microphones, yelling across the street to each other, nor the harassment shown us and the camping out in our neighborhood for 52 weeks a year, 6 to 7 days a week. That is huge. I want to reiterate what we want you to do. 1, remove one line of code stating the undefined exemptions from the voice ordinance are political or religious. Follow the examples of the cities that we've mentioned. Number 2, help and require the mayor and his departments to enforce the laws and code that exists and are stated in the Rochester Police Department Demonstrator Guide to Federal, State, and local laws and ordinances. Honking, harassment of patients, and harassment of us who reside on the border of a residential district and a commercial district. Right now, the city allows people to ignore that statute. Because of the silos established in past government departments, the lack of enforcement has become a priority of all the neighborhood associations as each person in charge. Where is the credibility if you don't enforce anything? Provide the health and well-being every citizen of Rochester is promised. Our stress levels with noise, traffic hazards, and harassment continue to wear on us. So I ask you, how can we continue to be the city's ambassadors? How do we answer the question, are you still happy with your decision to move downtown? We sincerely hope that you will support our request because we are all activists. We are following up. We will be following up with each of you by email, and we will be back. Thank you.
Benjamin Hart, Zoom.
Good evening. My name is Ben Hart. I was asked to speak for the Rochester Housing Coalition. We're a coalition of housing providers. I just want to cut through some of the rhetoric about landlords, and I don't think it's a dirty word to be a landlord. I think it's an honorable profession. I work right now at the University of Rochester. So some folks say you're a healthcare hero and all this stuff, but when I'm a landlord and I change hats, some would portray me as a villain. But I built that business while working full-time in human services, other places you might have heard of, YMCA, Hillside Children's Center. And I think a lot of us that saw problems with the housing stock, saw opportunities with the, dilapidated housing, are being punished for making good faith investments into the city that we care about. And also this rhetoric that we live in the suburbs and just come in to extract wealth. That's not true of myself. I grew up in the 19th ward. My first houses were all bought in the 19th ward. I live in North Winton Village now because that's where my wife lives. So kind of just de facto live there. But, I used to live off of Lower Winter Avenue. So I'm pretty much a lifelong city resident. And, I got into this business because I saw houses that could be rejuvenated. And I've got a lot of losses these past couple of years. I've got a tenant who, moved in with his girlfriend. She was the reason he qualified. When she left, he stopped paying rent, and it happened to coincide with the pandemic. I don't think he really had any hardship caused by the pandemic because he wasn't employable or working beforehand, and he's not employable or working now. He was able to fill out some paperwork and justify it enough to get 15 months of rent paid, but he's still 7 months behind. And but because he applied, it's just seems to be an indefinite, moratorium. Even though the moratorium is technically expired, he's still protected by it for simple reason that he's applied for money that doesn't exist. So I know there's not much you can do about the eviction moratorium. It's a statewide problem, but
30 seconds.
there is rent control and so-called good cause eviction. I think it'll increase the cost of burden to housing providers, forcing them to assume lower risk tenants, reducing housing opportunities for low-income tenants. Good cause eviction gives the tenant an indefinite lease, meaning they have to bring them to court in order to remove a problem tenant from the property. Oftentimes, the best way to remove a problem tenant is with a non-renewal notice. I think there's a need for more quality low-income housing in the city of Rochester, and our goal is to see more stabilized housing market with less turnover, less evictions, reasonable rents, and accountability. Let's cut through the rhetoric, look at it as a supply and demand
Time is
problem,
up.
and assist those supplying housing. Thank you.
Terry Cecchini.
My name is Terry, and I would like you to pass good cause. I emailed you in October telling you to pass it, and the tenant union told me that you still haven't passed the law. In 2020, landlords from Florida bought my building and my rent went up over 40%. They said it would go up $25, but then they kept making it higher. Then in January, they sold my property to new landlords, and now they're telling me I'm going to have to go. And rent is going up again by $125 in April. I've lived here 12 years and I'm on disability, and I have a fixed income, and I don't have anywhere to go. The tenant union told me you're thinking about good cause, but you guys and the mayor are thinking about waiting until April or May, and that will be too late for me. Me and my dogs will be evicted. I want the city to pass a good cause policy that will protect tenants like me from evictions and non-renewal of leases and huge rent increases for no good reasons.
Mara Hamilton, Zoom.
Hi, everyone. I'm here to urge you to protect our community by allowing people to be safe and remain in their homes. Imagine not being guaranteed a safe place to come home to each night. Home should be a place to recover from the stresses of life, not an additional source of stress. And passing good cause eviction is the first step to reducing and preventing the harm caused by the unstable housing in Rochester. It is simply common sense that landlords should not be able to evict people from their homes for no reason, especially when many of them don't put in the work to keep their houses safe for people to live in. Landlords are using the people of our city for their own profit, and we must tell them once and for all that we will not allow that here. There is a history in the city of unfair housing practices, and this is the first of many steps to begin to undo the racist history that has led to so much of the housing crisis we see today. You've had the time to research and learn about this bill, and now it's time for you to take action. You have the power. Use it to protect the people you serve, not the profits of already rich people. Thank you.
Mary DeLisandro.
Members of council, tonight, the tenants advocates will fight for good cause eviction. Who is this good for? What group of tenants is good cause eviction targeted at? Is it good for the neighborhoods? In order to answer those questions, how much do you know about the topic? Have you sat down at eviction court and watched what goes on? Have you spoken with an eviction attorney that represents housing providers in court? Do you know that it is very difficult to evict any tenant for other than non-payment? Do you know how expensive it is to evict a tenant? The tenant advocates have fought hard the last couple of years for added protections in the Tenant Protection Act. How has that worked out for them? Read the newspapers. Rents are at an all-time high. Tenants cannot find apartments. The excuses are COVID. Not true. COVID helped with raising rents, but more restrictions will always mean higher rents. What do you think the consequence of good cause eviction will be? Lower rents, higher rents, better neighborhoods, more quality investors that want to invest in Rochester? Will good cause eviction be declared unconstitutional? Albany is being sued for good cause eviction. Rochester keeps putting more and more restrictions on housing providers, and the problems keep getting worse and worse. Maybe it's time to look at tenant accountability. It won't get you votes, but it may help the neighborhoods become stabilized. I think Rochester experienced 81 murders last year. How many of those murders were committed by investors? I think you are smart enough to know the rest of the questions without me spoon feeding you. So if you want higher rents and tenants not being able to find housing, I suggest you vote affirmatively so you get your votes, but hurt the people you are supposed to be helping. Just because the tenants advocates are advocating for good cause eviction, it doesn't mean it is good for them. How many of the advocates are paid? What will they get out of it? I'm not paid, and I'm selling everything because city leadership does not have what it takes to make our community safe again and do what needs to be done to help people be the best that they can be. You just keep pandering for those votes instead of working on the real root of the problem: self-respect, accountability, etc. Not excuses and enabling which does not promote
30
self-respect.
seconds.
Respectfully, Mary DeLisandro.
Peter Peters, Zoom.
Good evening. President Melendez and council members, thank you for this opportunity to speak before council. I'm here as a member of REACH Advocacy to speak about housing justice. REACH is in support of the citywide tenants union's proposal for stabilizing housing for all citizens of Rochester, especially the 50% of our tenants who are rent burdened. I urge your support and ask that you vote to pass the eviction reduction law this coming March, and that you form a legislative working group to work with tenants, city administrators, and council to craft a Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. The reason we support these efforts is that too many of our fellow citizens, mostly Black and brown, are facing housing vulnerability because of current developmental priorities. For example, in the Market View Heights neighborhood, there are 180 active eviction notices impacting approximately 400 people. That is 400 people who are in fear of losing their homes because of development over which they have no say or control. We can do better than this to protect the homes of our neighbors. Yes, we're not just talking about property. We are speaking about people's homes. Home is the place where we are supposed to feel safe, where we can unwind and end our workday, where we enjoy family and friends, where our whole sense of identity and character are formed. But for many, there is fear for their homes. Such fear is an element in the anger and violence we witness in our city. When home life is threatened with insecurity and loss, people have no sense of social order or of the common good. By including residents
30
in
seconds.
actual development decisions, we encourage all to participate in crafting a vision for the common good of our city. I urge each one of you to sign on to these two legislative proposals and give to our tenant neighbors a real voice in protecting their homes. Thank you.
Elizabeth McGriff, Zoom.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth McGriff, and I'm with the Citywide Tenants Union of Rochester. And one of the things that I want, City Council to know that the pandemic has recently ended on January 15th, and right now there's 3,000 cases pending for eviction in the court system. Normally, because of the pandemic, we usually have about 8,000. We're close to that mark. And if this continues, we'll have a lot of homeless people in our community. We need laws and stipulations that are going to protect tenants and not leave them homeless in our community. One of them is good cause eviction. It gives the tenants the right to renew their tenancy. It's not rent control, as most landlords would say, but it is an opportunity. It gives them a defense when they go to court that this, if the landlord raises the rent too much, it just says that the landlord has to open his books and say this is a reason why, because he's raising the rents because he can't afford it or because there's some financial hardship that it's going to bring them. So good cause would help our community. It would help tenants to remain in their community and stay in their community without being evicted without a good cause. The other bill that we're asking City Council to pass is no C of O, no evictions. A lot of the tenants that live in some of the worst housing conditions in the city of Rochester, mainly because landlords, we have investor landlords that come to our community and will invest in properties, but not do the upkeep of the properties. So what this law would do would protect tenants from predatory landlords. It would give tenants an opportunity to speak out about the conditions. And if there is no C of O on the property, then the tenant can stay in that property, even though the conditions are bad, rather than losing their housing. And we would like the city to have better code enforcement policies. So this will, improve the living conditions of our city. The other thing that we're asking City Council to pass is the tenant opportunity to purchase. Like for example, if a landlord's not able to keep up with the property and the tenants have the wherewithal, and if there's policies that pass where the tenants could purchase the property from the landlord, then it gives tenants the opportunity to build equity. Sometimes tenants have lived in certain properties for like 30 years and have paid the mortgage basically to that property. And then, a lot of investors come in and they want to sell the property. Instead of selling it to investors, they can sell to people who have lived in this community, who have worked in the community, and can now have equity in the community. Thank you.
Annie Canan, voicemail. You're on mute, Barb.
I'm sorry, was everyone able to hear that?
No.
I'll turn the speaker up as loud as I can. She was very low on there. Let me try it again.
Your sound isn't shared, so make sure you share the sound.
Hello, this is Bonnie Canan speaking. I'm calling as a member of
Bob, you muted. You gotta unmute, huh?
on the expansion of quality of life for the people in the Northeast. Our group works on a multiple neighborhood approach, and we have leaders in each of those neighborhoods, and so we focus again on the quality of life for our area. We do not operate in a hierarchy. We have a consensus approach that we use to dealing with our concerns. Okay, here's the premise that we.
Is that the end, Barb, or is it still playing?
Yeah, she was supposed to call back and leave another message because she got cut off. She never forwarded another message.
Okay, thank you. Kevin Yost by Zoom.
Good evening, Kevin Yost, 1474 Middle Road, Town of Henrietta. At the last meeting, I spoke about the need to not quash the things named after or images named after our city's three founders, Colonel Nathaniel Rochester, Major William Fitzhugh, and Major Charles Carroll. They, even though they did own slaves, but that was just the times they lived in, and they gave up their slaves when the state banned slavery. And nobody's perfect, and we're not criminals or villains like Edmund Pettus and the Confederate generals were, and Nathan Bedford Forrest. We need to the model statue of Colonel Rochester, 1934, that never, the city centennial that never became a statue because the Depression was happening it's in the basement of City Hall, or the Central Library needs to be made into a statue finally, either Parcel 5 or the green space between East Main, Union, and University Avenue. It'll grow when universities reconnected, when its interloop north is removed, and that can be called Daniel Prude Park. And then whichever the other two parks, a small sculpture of Catlin Tower. And it's really, it was a crime that Colonel Rochester's statue in the South Wedge was vandalized. This no different than when the statues of Frederick Douglass were damaged or destroyed. It's just as much a criminal act, vandalism, defacing of property. Thank you.
Harry Davis, Zoom. Mr. Davis, can you hear me? Harry, are you there? Mr. Davis? Can you hear me? President Melendez, you want to wait a minute or?
Wait another 10 seconds, see if Mr. Davis can get connected to audio or something. And if not, we will conclude the speak to council.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, Mr. Davis, if you are able to submit comments to us, we welcome them. But that concludes this month's Speak to Council session. I would like to thank all of our speakers for their participation, and tonight's council meeting will begin at 7:30 p.m. Thank you.